So I've been faced with a really big decision over the last few weeks, and I've been totally stuck. In fact, I came to a decision, then not long after I communicated that to the people involved, I then backed out of the commitment I had made, which left me feeling not only like I'd let myself down, but that I'd let these other people down and also made a complete fool of myself. This is such a common struggle for me and has been right throughout my life. So this got me thinking about how my autism plays such a huge part in my decision-making ability, and indeed how it affects every decision I make, and how it also so often cripples me in the process. Hi, I'm Phil, a late diagnosed autistic older adult, and it's my goal to advocate for autistic people by sharing positive information about autism and sharing some of my experiences along the way. One experience that I've had through my life over and over again is people commenting that I am indecisive. This labelling of me is something that has been challenging, but the more challenging aspect of that is the fact that I can see how that label may seem to fit my behaviours. As so often, from the biggest life decisions to the smallest everyday trivial decisions, I get stuck and unable to move. And then when I do break free and make a decision, so often I either try to reverse that decision shortly after, or I get stuck in a cycle of self-loathing or self-blame. This can often take the form of cursing myself for making what I subsequently decided was a bad decision, but may equally lead to severe anxiety or even depression. What I've since discovered is that these things can be such a common experience for many autistic people. So let's have a bit of a look at why this might be the case. Firstly, autistic people often experience challenges with executive functioning in the context of decision making. This can include things like planning, prioritising and managing tasks, with the result of even simple decisions causing overwhelm and leading to prolonged deliberation or avoidance. This prolonged deliberation is sometimes also referred to as analysis paralysis, where we get stuck in an endless loop of possibilities and their consequences. Autistic people also often experience our senses in more complex ways. Often this might result in sensory overwhelm. When this coincides with a decision situation, we might find ourselves unable to focus on the decision or task at hand. So to put it another way, our environment may impact our decision-making ability. Perfectionism is also a common co-occurring condition in autistic people. This can lead to the fear of making wrong choices or fear of not meeting expectations. Another key characteristic of autistic people is rigid thinking patterns. This might make it hard to see alternative perspectives and needing to stay with familiarity. This may be especially prevalent when a decision may lead to a change in our routines, which can be difficult for any autistic person to negotiate. And this can also lead to the autistic person not willing to try new things. Making the decision in the presence of other people may also be challenging, because in that situation we may already be in a state of social overwhelm, with our cognitive processes already stretched to their limit, just dealing with all the challenges of social communication. Add the need for a decision at this point, and we may easily tip into shutdown. This is a situation I know all too well. In extreme overwhelm, the effort of making a decision when our system is already overloaded can shut our communication down completely. This can lead to situational mutism, where we temporarily lose the ability to speak. Regardless of the individual mechanism making the decision process difficult, the autistic person is likely to be experiencing overwhelm during this decision process. And this overwhelm can also trigger anxiety, leading to catastrophizing and overthinking. Decision paralysis in autistic people can result in many missed opportunities throughout life, from missed career opportunities to relationship breakdown and even an inability to engage in many aspects of daily life. So what was my big decision that caused me so much trouble this week? Well, for those of you who have been listening to these podcasts for some time, you might have picked up that I've worked as a sound engineer for much of my working life in many different roles. What may not be quite so obvious though is that sound and audio have also always been a special interest for me since I was a child. Okay, so far so good, but how might that cause a problem? Well, in the last week or so, some colleagues of mine have offered to give me a PA system that has come out of a church and is no longer required. Now, even better, this system almost exactly matches the equipment that I own and use in my live audio production business, and indeed would double the size of my current inventory. Well, brilliant, right? Free gear, perfect alignment, matches my business and current systems, not to mention matching my special interest. The one thing about PA gear is it is very big and very heavy. So after agreeing to take the equipment and indeed even travelling to pick it up, I had a massive panic attack and meltdown due to the overwhelm of how I would store, move and use the extra equipment into the future, including the need to employ staff to help me to be able to use this extra gear where I usually work as a single operator. The result was, after saying yes, I turned and walked away from this opportunity. And subsequently, I've been left in a state of confusion, disappointment and anxiety ever since. And I've also left these colleagues in an awkward position, now needing to find a new home for this equipment. So why might I have even considered this an opportunity if it was going to be too overwhelming? Well, as I say, audio is a special interest, and the thought of taking the equipment and even doing the work to fix it up and bring it back to top condition is something that does excite me. So there is a tug of war within me, even beyond the business opportunity. Now, this is one detailed example of this type of decision paralysis that I experience, but there are many more, and some other examples include things like buying a house. This was also a huge one, and I spent the entire contract cooling off period desperately hoping the purchase would somehow magically fall through, and equally considering whether to walk away from the purchase. Another example that now seems a bit trivial is a couple of years ago, Trish and I went to buy a boat. After looking for years for a very specific type of boat secondhand that is no longer made and has not been made for 30 years, we found the perfect example that was at a great price that had not been snapped up. We looked at it and it was perfect, and the sellers were a really nice older couple who also wanted us to have it. But I had a panic attack, and on that occasion then shut down, causing me to walk away from that opportunity also. In that instance, I realised a few hours later that I had caused us to miss out on something that we had been dreaming about for more than 15 years. But when I called to try to change that, it had already been sold. Now, this was an interesting one in that my overwhelm and subsequent shutdown while we were looking at the boat led Trish to comment later that it was like I was having some sort of autistic meltdown. Now, at that time, neither of us had an understanding of what autism really is, but Trish's concerned observation at this point actually resonated with me and set me down the path of my own autistic discovery and subsequent diagnosis about a year later. But it's not just big decisions that might cause issue for autistic people. So often it is also the very little daily decisions that can also be challenging. Things like deciding what to watch on TV of an evening or what to have for dinner. Now, these might seem trivial to many people, but even these can cause decision paralysis, which might appear even more odd since as autistic people, we might only have a few options of what we might eat for dinner anyway. Likewise for TV shows, our routines and resistance to change might also mean we only have a very small selection to choose from. But even still, the decision can be excruciating. Other examples here might include things like what to wear for the day, whether to accept that social invitation, whether to buy that item on the internet, or even what plumber to call to fix the broken pipe. Another factor that can be very prevalent in autistic decision making is demand avoidance. Demand avoidance is very common in autistic and neurodivergent people, and as the name suggests, when a demand is placed on us, the immediate response is to want to resist that demand. This can come into play when making all sorts of decisions. An obvious one for me is when I'm in a shop and the salesperson attempts to infer urgency about the sale. In those instances, if I sense any pressure being placed on me, I will always walk out of the shop, especially when I'm being pressured to buy it because the discount will expire after today. An opposite example, and one with a more positive outcome, was in my relationship with Trish before we were married. We were together for 17 years before getting married. And while many outside people thought Trish should leave me because I had not made that commitment, Trish understood instinctively that applying pressure on me to decide would not be beneficial. So she let me, in my time, get to the point where I was able to commit fully, even though that took many years. And as a footnote to this story, I think if that demand had have been placed on me, I would have most likely walked away, which would have been a bad outcome for both of us. So in this, I think Trish knew me better than I knew myself. Another possibly less thought about aspect to autistic decision making relates to how we might be pre-programmed to please other people. This people pleasing is also called fawning, and it is one of the primeval threat responses along with fight, flight and freeze. In fawning, we might try to be over-accommodating of the other people's needs at the expense of our own, leading us to make decisions which might place us in uncomfortable situations as we put everybody else's needs before our own. This might lead us into sensory overwhelm as we end up in situations beyond what our autistic system can cope with. It can also cause us to give too much of our own physical or financial resources as we try to help other people. This can lead to burnout, and in some cases, autistic people have been taken advantage of by unscrupulous people in these situations. So what are some things you can do to help the autistic person in your life make good decisions and overcome decision paralysis? So often as we go through life, we are taught to ask open-ended questions so as to elicit answers with nuance and detail rather than a yes or no. Helping an autistic person come to a decision is maybe not the time to be looking for that detail. Trust me when I say we have probably thought of every possibility to the decision outcomes, and often this is the cause for the anxiety and paralysis. This time of decision might be more an occasion to offer a limited variety of options. For example, asking an autistic person what they want for dinner might likely lead to the answer of, "I don't know." A more productive question might be, "Would you like spaghetti or chicken nuggets," for instance? And please insert your own common or safe autistic food choices at this point. As autistic people, we will often have taken any question and analysed all the options, looking at the pros and cons, or any other detail that may be present. By giving a limited selection of possibilities, the autistic person does not need to get stuck in analysing all the choices and can focus on the decision. The other, maybe more obvious thing you might want to avoid when helping an autistic person make decisions is placing pressure or demands on them. As we talked about earlier, this can trigger demand avoidance and lead to the autistic person walking away from making a decision at all. Maybe a better path is allowing the autistic person to have more time to make decisions. This might help with demand avoidance, but also beyond that, autistic people often experience processing delay. So allowing time for the autistic person to fully process the information will be helpful. Depending on the information and the decision, this could be minutes, hours, or even days, and sometimes longer, like 17 years. Despite the complexity of autistic decision making, it is also important to allow the autistic person the autonomy to make their own decisions. And to help with executive functioning difficulties, it may be helpful to break decisions into smaller steps. While we might be labelled as indecisive or even believe that of ourselves after a lifetime of agonising over almost every decision, there may actually be some benefits about how autistic people go about making decisions. Autistic people excel at making rational decisions by considering all the facts. We typically have a strong focus on patterns, logic and structure, which may help to achieve great outcomes. It has also been suggested that autistic decision-making styles help resist cognitive biases, which may be beneficial in technology and data analysis. And because of our tendency to be driven by both facts and values, our decisions may tend to be both logical and fair. In addition to this is the fact that autistic people are less likely to be swayed by irrelevant context, emotional cues, or social expectations when making decisions. A few examples of this are as follows. Optimism bias is where someone might be more likely to focus on positive outcomes and downplay negative outcomes when making decisions. This can lead to underestimating timelines or ignoring risks. Research has shown that autistic people are less likely to be influenced by these types of biases. Autistic people are also less likely to keep investing in a losing proposition, even though substantial time or money might have already been spent. This tendency to keep chasing a losing situation is called the sunk cost fallacy. How information is presented can sway people in their decisions with a tendency towards focusing on optimistic outcomes. This is called the framing effect, where someone might be more inclined to accept an outcome where they keep 7 out of 10 of something rather than lose 3 out of 10. The autistic brain is more likely to recognise these two outcomes as exactly the same, rather than be swayed by the framing of the facts. And similar to this is the fact that autistic brains are less likely to be swayed by emotive arguments. All these examples show that autistic people are often better able to take emotion or cognitive bias out of decision making to achieve logical or rational outcomes. This does not mean that autistic people are emotionless, just that we may be better able to separate emotions from facts. Okay, so that's my very brief look into why autistic people find decision making so difficult. If you're autistic, have you been labelled indecisive? Or have you missed out on life opportunities due to decision paralysis? I would love to hear your experiences in the comments section. And remember, while some might see us as indecisive, we are actually autistic decision makers. And with that distinction can come a little bit of self-forgiveness. Autistic decision makers are careful decision makers. We look at all the possibilities and maybe filter the bias and emotion to come up with the best decisions we can make. We might take a bit longer, but be assured any decision we do make has been done so with much care and deliberation. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.